Thanks again for inviting me here. Very glad to talk about the Research Councils UK and the Newton Fund. And as Vivian has said, we've been very closely engaged with this, helping Biz, I hope, to get it developed over the last 18 months or so. And it's a really exciting opportunity for everybody, including the Research Councils, to be able to work with some of these countries that we haven't always worked with before. So just briefly, RCUK is the partnership of the 7 UK Research Councils, and I think you probably know who they all are, but the logos are up there. All the research councils are involved in this, and I'll describe a little bit more about that later in my presentation. But Research Councils UK is hoping to make the 15-country engagement a little bit easier by not having 7 research councils to engage with separately, unless it's essential for you to have a bilateral discussion with a particular discipline area. So we do have a kind of overall single focus for dialogue over this, and hope we can help that and direct you to the right people in individual councils if it's not a RCUK-wide activity. So the fund, as you heard, launched in December 2013, and as RCUK, we bid to BIS for our share of the fund, so pretty much like you guys will bid to us for funding, we had to bid to BIS for this money, and so we set out a range of programs that we would like to win funding for under the Newton Fund to then manage on behalf of the UK research base. And so in doing that, we were informed a lot by our own research communities already. So somebody was asking about how you can input to this. We obviously have a whole host of ways of you to feed into research councils, through advisory boards, etc. So we are listening to the community when we've been developing these calls. We also, of course, are very much informed by the partner countries, and one of the ways of making this an ODA compliant fund is by responding to the needs of those partner countries. So that's a very important part of the planning process. So we've been able and lucky to win over £200 million worth of funding for 5 years to manage on behalf of the Newton Fund with these 15 emerging countries. We do have a particular focus on some key countries, and as Madeline was saying, we've already got very strong engagement with the likes of India, China, a lot of work with Brazil as well. And so we do have some substantial relationships with many of these countries already, but what it's given us the opportunity to do is work with a host of new countries that perhaps we've had less engagement with in the past. As Paul also mentioned, our focus has been on excellent research partnerships. We have limited resource to deliver our international collaboration, so we have had a focus in the past. So having this new money, and I think it is new money, to do this is a great opportunity. And we do hope to offer opportunity across most of these countries. Again, the issue in year 1 has already been touched upon. This is a partnership approach. We have, I've got colleagues in the room here, Kate Hamer from the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council. Kate, do you want to wave your hand? And Louisa Amtulla from the Medical Research Council. So we've all been merrily trotting the globe trying to build relationships with these organisations and trying to build a partnership approach in a sort of context where many of them have annual calendar year budget cycles, and so had already committed their funding for the year, and it's been difficult to get some big scale programs off the ground this year, but we're really confident we should be able to do more next year. So just briefly, when we put our bid into BIS, we highlighted 4 broad themes for the Newton Fund for Research Councils UK. Scientific capability of the future, so this is really the emphasis on capacity strengthening and gives us an opportunity to do things across a whole range of areas. Health, an obvious one for official development assistance, sustainable food, water and energy, and the interrelationships between those 3, and economic prosperity of developing societies. So in this way, we're covering quite a wide range of research councils. And outside of that, we have, and I'll describe this a bit more, also given some opportunity for some bottom-up approaches. So we're active in all 3 pillars. Research is the biggest, but I'll just briefly mention what we're doing in the other 2 as well. So the people pillar, as Claire referred to, we're looking at an international PhD partnering activity, which will be thematic and challenge-based. We haven't quite pinned down the structure of this, and haven't got any calls live at the moment. But just to give you a sort of sense of what that will involve, it again is about building research capacity through international training. It's also allowing partner country early career researchers to engage in international intellectual networks, develop international joint training pathways. I mean, essentially what I'd say is that pretty much like our funding of postgraduate training through the block grant system, we're looking at offering a very flexible opportunity to institutions to develop a program of partnership at the institutional level to help build capacity, but also to give the opportunity for overseas researchers to come and be trained in the UK for short periods of time. And again, it's a sort of 6 to 12 month placement opportunity, and similarly to allow UK students to go overseas. And there are some particular requirements around that with regards to the Newton funds, which will be described more clearly in the guidance for this in terms of how this can be funded under the ODA rules. But we are, as Claire said, looking at an institutional relationship here that will run for a period of, for the lifetime of the fund, which is a 5-year period. And I don't think anybody's actually mentioned that it is a 5-year period, so the spend all has to happen in those 5 years. So we will be limited in terms of what we can do beyond years 2 and 3 in terms of longer term programs because of the requirement to actually spend that money for you guys to spend that money in the 5-year period unless we get an extension later on. So we will be looking at longer term approaches, and it will be about trying to build some really substantial and sustainable links. And we haven't, as I say, quite pinned down the details of that yet, but we hope to have that announced fairly soon. We also have, under the people pillar, a number of preparatory activities for larger scale programs, which will be the sort of workshops, networking activities that individual research councils will be using as the normal sort of research councils approach in terms of preparing for a collaborative call, getting the communities together. So they'll be very much part of a joint call process rather than the separate opportunity. And also some knowledge exchange and training in research infrastructure use and funding policy. And I'll be working with the British Council really where there's opportunities there to get some input from the research council community in terms of systems for funding overseas. Obviously our biggest area of activity is the programme activity, the research programme activity, and we're looking at a number of different ranges of activity here. So there's a scoping potential, some shorter term funding for exploratory research, full-scale research programs that will be run out of the individual research councils and also some RCUK-wide schemes, and a new approach called joint centres, which is looking at linking some of our already very well-funded institutions in partner countries with similar organisations and institutions overseas to increase their competitiveness for future opportunity. And this will not just be within the Newton Fund, so we're hoping that this will be really good preparation for all sorts of other funding opportunities. In the translation space, obviously, as you all know, we've got a big focus on impact with research councils, so we would anticipate that these research programmes are developed with a view to longer-term impact, with the opportunity to exploit the outcomes for development relevance. There'll be quite a lot of activity around supporting access to infrastructure for research and training needs under this pillar. And we will be partnering as well with Innovate UK on research and innovation bridges, which I'm sure David will talk a little bit more about later. So just talking quickly, run through the current calls and some of the future plans. So a proportion of this funding, around 60 million, has been allocated to RCUK-wide activities. So these are activities that will allow participation from all of the research councils, and it can be that these proposals will come through in distinct discipline areas, but it could also be that they're interdisciplinary, which we'd very much welcome. There's a number of things that have been going on in the last few months. The first call we had out was with CONICET in Chile, for international research projects and networking projects. That's closed, and there's a panel meeting expected shortly. We've just closed the call with Brazil, with CONFAP, and just for reference, CONFAP are a federation of national state research funders, so we haven't made them become research funders. That's not quite clear. I think in what Madeleine said earlier, they do, there's 27, I think, or 27 states in Brazil, and they do all fund research. And what is new, I think, is that CONFAP coming together to work with us in this way. So we're really excited about that. They've been a great partner to work with, and really, brought together their complexity, the added complexity of the 27 as part of the 15 with the 7, to make this a possibility, and had huge interest in this call. So I'm afraid there's also going to be a fair amount of disappointment too, because it's really been very oversubscribed. But great to see that. And one of the things that we're doing with this is scoping research in a range of areas, and we're hoping this will help us inform a larger scale call subsequently with CONFAP, so that if we see a lot of interest in certain areas, then we can really look at doing some more in this space. So it's a great opportunity to be able to do something this year with CONFAP. We're discussing, as I mentioned, PhD partnership approaches with a number of countries. We're close to agreement on 2 major opportunities, which we hope to announce in the next couple of months. And there are also joint research calls under negotiation with several countries. And I mentioned, I think earlier, there's 2 approaches one smaller scale pilot research like we're doing with Brazil at the moment, and another for full-scale programs where we've got more mature relationships and we think the research community is really sort of well established in terms of partnership, or better established, certainly. So just on that as well, I think that what we've tended to do is, I mentioned earlier, the 4 sort of thematic areas. So what we've done in discussing in partnership with these countries is we've, where it seems sensible to have highlight areas, we've introduced highlight areas, but we've tried to keep an open element to this as well, so that if there are things that are going on that we're not aware of, people can put applications into any area, as long as it fits the ODA requirements. So just a couple of examples from MRC and the SRC in terms of the sorts of things that are going on. So in China, and you can talk to Louisa more about this later if you'd like, there's a regenerative medicine and stem cells call that's recently closed, and the awards are expected to be announced within the next few weeks. There's a joint centres partnership call with the Department of Biotechnology and Medical Research Council in India, also closed and awaiting a panel meeting. There's a joint call with MRC and DBT and Department for International Development in India on women and children's health, which closes today. And some more things in the pipeline around substance misuse in relationship with mental health in India, non-communicable diseases in South Africa, also bringing in GlaxoSmithKline and South African Medical Research Council. And MRC are currently discussing opportunity with partnership with Wellcome Trust, as Madeline refers to, in order to maximise the opportunities for health research under the Newton Fund, particularly in countries where there's less match funding available. In Brazil, there's a call in the SRC space that recently closed on sustainable urban development, and this one's an interesting one because it brings in another funding partner from the developed world, NWO, and this is allowed. We're trying to focus on these bilateral relationships here, but if there is good scientific sense, good research sense to bring in other partners under these kind of ODA rules, then we can do that. And the SRC has taken a sort of generic approach in the broad areas that are highlighted there, some of which, I mean, they fit under the 4 RC UK areas, and workshops are underway with partners to scope these areas, with first calls coming out towards the end of the year or early 2015. So there's going to be inundated with a wealth of web pages, which I hope, working with Alicia and her team and with the UK and others, we can try and streamline a bit. But I think because it wasn't possible to have web pages on the BIS website initially, we're all trying to make our opportunities available. So the RC UK opportunities will all be posted on the RC UK Newton Fund webpage, linked to BIS web pages and to others as they develop. We do aim in the next couple of months to have a forward programme of activity across all research councils so that you can really plan your approach. We're aware you're being bombarded with a huge amount of things here. So one thing we're very much trying to do is develop a consistent approach as far as the peer review is concerned, so that with a full-scale call with country, with Mexico will be similar to a full-scale call with Chile or Brazil. So you can sort of cut and paste things that can be easily cut and paste and contextualise them for the countries that you're working with. Really, we want to try and make this very complex programme as simple as possible for you. And in terms of asking advice, all the research councils have teams that, and leads that are working on the Newton Fund. So if it's related to a particular research council activity, do come to us and ask our advice as you would do normally for grant funding from the research councils. We also have people in my team in the RC UK strategy unit who are on the phone and have been constantly on the phone for Brazil, for example, over the last couple of days, who are involved in managing the RC UK-wide activities. So do come to us for advice, and I'm sure we can help you. Thanks very much.